The hallway buzzed with noise, laughter, lockers slamming shut, conversations echoing under warm afternoon light. I stood by the second-floor window, holding a worn-out book I wasn't reading. I was watching, waiting. Below, near the vending machine, I saw him, smiling, that soft, charming smile he once gave me. But today, it was for someone else. She laughed, touched his arm, and he didn't pull away. He looked happy. The kind of happy he hadn't been around me in weeks. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. And then I heard it. Not with my ears, but from somewhere deeper. A voice I recognized as his, but not spoken aloud. She won't leave anyway. She's too soft for that. Too scared to be alone. His lips never moved. But I heard him. Clear. Cruel. Cold. Something in me stilled. I looked down at the book in my hand. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. Somewhere deep down, I had always known. I was the safe option. The backup plan. The girl who would never say no. He looked up suddenly, like he could feel me watching. Our eyes met. His smile faltered, but I gave him nothing. No tears. No reaction. Just a calm smile. And then I turned and walked away. I didn't go home after that. Not right away. I walked the long way around town. Past the library, the riverbank, the tea shop where we used to sit after school. The same one where I always paid, even though he was the one with a part-time job. Back then I told myself it was love. That love meant waiting, giving, forgiving. But now, looking through the window of that tea shop alone, I realized it wasn't love. It was fear. Fear of losing him. Fear of being alone. Fear of not being enough. I remembered all the moments I excused, the birthdays he missed, the cold replies, the way he laughed when I cried. I had convinced myself I just needed to love harder, that if I held on tight enough, he'd remember how to hold me back. But the truth was, he never planned to stay, and I was the only one pretending. By the time I reached home, the sky was dark, and my legs were sore. I didn't cry. I didn't check my phone. I didn't write a goodbye message. I just packed, neatly, silently. No dramatic exit. No closure needed. He thought I'd chase him, that I'd beg for a reason, demand the truth, scream for him to care. But this time, I didn't fight. I let him go, not because I was weak, but because I finally realized I didn't need to be held by someone who only reached for me when they felt me slipping. I didn't tell anyone I was transferring. No goodbyes, no explanations. I just disappeared. The new school felt quiet in a different way, not like silence that smothers, but silence that soothes. The classroom was smaller, the light through the windows softer. My new room was bare at first, just white walls and a second-hand desk, but it felt like a blank page, a place where I could finally breathe without being watched. No one here knew who I was. No one saw me as his girlfriend, or the girl who always waited. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was just me. I got a part-time job at a small bookstore on weekends. The woman who owned it didn't ask many questions. She always left a warm cup of tea for me at the counter. Jasmine, my favorite, even though I'd never told her. She once said, "People come and go, but peace is a choice." And I was starting to believe her. Slowly I was rebuilding, not to prove anything, not to get him back, but to finally be someone I could recognize when I looked in the mirror. I read more, ate more, smiled more, not because I was healed, but because I had stopped bleeding for someone who never brought bandages. There were no dramatic makeovers, no wild revenge plans, no rebound stories, just quiet mornings, little habits, and the space to exist without constantly questioning my worth. Then one day, he found me. It started with a message, just 3 words, "How are you?" From a number I'd deleted months ago. I stared at it for a moment. I didn't feel anything. Not anger, not fear, not longing, just stillness. I didn't reply. 2 days later, another text came in. "A was in your area. Can we talk?" And that weekend, he came. He walked into the bookstore like a stranger pretending to remember where he belonged. I saw him through the window before he noticed me, standing awkwardly, hands in his pockets, like a boy searching for something he already lost. He looked thinner, tired, worn. I stepped out from behind the shelf. Our eyes met. For a second he smiled, like old times. "You really work here," he said, like he was surprised I had a life without him. "Yeah," I answered quietly. "People grow when they're left alone long enough." He laughed nervously. "You look different." "I am." His smile faded. "I miss you." I tilted my head. You don't. You miss the version of me that needed you. He froze, and for once he had no words. I returned behind the counter, and picked up the tea waiting for me. You were right, I said softly. I was too soft, too patient, too forgiving, but that version of me doesn't live here anymore. He looked lost, standing in the middle of a life that no longer had a place for him, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for closing the door. I had finally built a home within myself, and I wasn't going to let him walk through it like it was still his to enter. He didn't come back to the bookstore again, but the messages kept coming. Can we just talk? You look happy. Is there someone else? I messed up. I know that now. I read them, every one, and I said nothing, because I had learned something important. Closure doesn't come from hearing "I'm sorry." It comes from realizing you no longer need it. At school, life moved gently. I studied. I worked. I made quiet friends. I laughed, sometimes without meaning to. And that's when I noticed him. Not him. Not the boy I had let go, but someone else. Someone quieter. Still. Present. He wasn't loud about it. He didn't flirt or pry. He didn't ask for my number or try to get too close. But he noticed the small things. How I skipped lunch but kept candy in my bag. How I reread the same novel 3 times. How I smiled differently when it was real. One day, while walking beside me in silence, he said, "You carry yourself like someone who's been through something and survived." I looked up, surprised. But he didn't push, just offered a soft nod and walked ahead. It wasn't romance, it was recognition. Meanwhile, the texts from the past started to fray at the edges. I miss your voice. Remember that tea shop? You said you'd always stay. But I wasn't the same girl who wrote those promises. He thought I was healing just to come back stronger. For him. But the truth was, I wasn't becoming someone for him to regret losing. I was becoming someone I'd never lose again. The school festival came near the end of term. Banners, music, the smell of food stalls, everyone laughing like life hadn't cracked them open yet. I was at a small table, tying paper tags to books for a fundraiser, when someone told me, "There's a guy outside asking for you." I turned slowly, and there he was, standing near the fence, eyes searching, hands buried deep in his hoodie sleeves. He looked smaller somehow, not in size, in presence, like he wasn't sure if he belonged here anymore. He walked up, slower than I expected. "You said you didn't want to talk," he said quietly. "I still don't," I replied, but he stayed. "I thought space would help, that you'd come back after some time." I sighed, still threading red string through a book tag, and I thought love meant not having to beg for it. He winced like he'd been hit. Then I was stupid. I didn't know how much you meant until I stopped him with a look. "No. You knew. You just didn't think I'd leave." And that was the difference. He looked down, swallowed, then with a hesitating breath, asked the question I knew was coming. "Is there someone else?" I stared at the stack of books between us, then slowly raised my eyes. "There's someone," I said softly. "But it's not about him. It's about me." I wasn't in love with anyone new. I was in love with who I was becoming, and that was enough. He looked at me like he didn't know who I was anymore. And maybe he didn't, because for the first time ever, I wasn't the girl standing still and waiting to be chosen. I had already chosen myself. Time passed, and strangely, people started to notice me, not because I tried to be seen, but because I had stopped trying at all. I walked through the same school halls where I once shrank myself small, and now, without even realizing it, I took up space. Teachers remembered my name. Classmates looked at me longer when they spoke. Even in silence, I was present. And then the rankings came out. I didn't expect much, but there it was, my name. Not at the bottom this time, not overlooked. I had climbed. I had studied not to prove anyone wrong, just to prove to myself that I was still here, capable, steady, rebuilding. As I turned from the bulletin board, I felt a presence behind me, and I didn't have to look to know who it was. He was staring at the same list, and then at me. "You've changed," he said quietly. I didn't smile, didn't flinch. "No," I replied. "I just stopped shrinking." He looked stunned. "I thought you were soft." "I am," I said calmly, "just not for you anymore." Later that evening, I received a message. Not from him, from someone else, the boy who had always been there in the quiet. The one who never asked me to be more or less than I was. "Congrats on the rankings," he wrote. "Also, when you said earlier that it's not about someone else, it's about you. I just want you to know, that's the kind of girl worth waiting for. No pressure, just truth. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I stared at my reflection in the window of the bus. No makeup, hair a little messy, my oldest hoodie pulled over my arms. But I didn't look lost anymore. I looked like someone who had found her way back to herself. The end of the year arrived quietly. Photos, yearbooks, glitter pens, and scribbled goodbyes. When mine came back to me, I flipped through it slowly. Pages of little messages. Thanks for helping me with notes. You're stronger than you look. Hope you never stop smiling like that. And at the back, a folded slip of paper. No name, but the handwriting was familiar. You taught me what it means to lose something real. I'll carry that lesson, even if I couldn't carry you. I folded it back without finishing. I didn't need to. There were no tears, because I wasn't holding grief anymore. Just quiet gratitude. Grateful that he left. Grateful that I did too. Outside, the sunlight fell gently across the school gate. My friends were laughing. The boy from before, the quiet one, stood near the edge, holding 2 bottles of soda, holding one out to me. Without a word, I took it, smiled. Not because I felt butterflies, but because I felt safe. We walked slowly, side by side, no rush. And in that stillness, I realized something. I didn't need a love that made me fight to keep it. I needed one that let me stay whole. And maybe, just maybe, that love could begin with the quiet, with peace, with me. The graduation ceremony felt like a quiet goodbye wrapped in sunlight. There were no loud celebrations, just folded programs, plastic-wrapped flowers, and the sound of cameras clicking across the courtyard. Everyone was scribbling messages in yearbooks, last-minute promises, inside jokes, and hopeful words they weren't brave enough to say out loud. When my yearbook came back, I flipped through it slowly. Pages filled with kind notes, little memories, things I didn't realize anyone had noticed. You always looked calm, even when things got hard. I'm glad I got to know the real you. Your silence said more than our noise ever could. And then, near the back, I found a folded note. No name, just handwriting I knew too well. You taught me what it means to lose something real. I'll carry that lesson, even if I couldn't carry you. I didn't finish reading it. I didn't need to, because I didn't feel anger anymore, or pain, or longing. What I felt was peace. And peace doesn't ask for closure. It just lets you go. Outside, the golden light stretched across the pavement like a farewell hug from the sky. My friends waved near the gate, laughter echoing, as they posed for one last photo. And a few steps away, standing under the shadow of a tree, was him. Not him, the other one, the quiet one, the boy who never tried to fix me, just stayed near while I fixed myself. He held out a drink. I took it. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We walked slowly down the street, the sound of our footsteps steady and soft. No holding hands, no confessions, just presence. And maybe that's what healing really looks like. Not loud, not rushed, but quiet, steady, gentle. I looked up at the sky, wide and endless, and in that moment, I realized something. Some goodbyes don't mean loss. They're just doors closing behind you, so you can finally walk into the life you were always meant to live. And I walked forward, not to be loved, not to be chosen, but simply, to be. It rained the next evening, not the dramatic, thunderous kind that made people run for cover. It was soft, gentle, like the sky was letting go of something slowly, without anger. I stood at the window, tea in hand, watching droplets trace silent rivers down the glass. The box still sat on my desk, unopened since this morning, but the book inside, I had read it before, twice, actually. I knew the story, the lines, the ending, but somehow, this time, I wanted to read it again, so I did. And when I turned the last page, I found a note tucked behind the back cover. It wasn't poetic, it wasn't trying too hard. It just said, "You don't have to love me back. I just hope you've stopped loving him." I closed the book slowly. No heartbeat raced, no tears formed, just a stillness, and a soft realization. I had. The next day, I walked to the bookstore. It wasn't my shift. I wasn't even sure she'd be open that early, but I went anyway. Rain boots, hoodie, no makeup. When I arrived, he was already there, leaning against the wall outside, a little damp from the rain, holding 2 cups of tea from the shop across the street. He didn't speak right away, just held one out to me, eyes lowered like he wasn't sure if I'd take it. I did. We sat on the front steps, letting the world pass by around us. Cars, clouds, a mother dragging a sleepy child under an umbrella. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about saying the right thing. He broke the silence first. I never wanted to be a replacement. I turned to look at him. He wasn't beautiful in the way my ex had been, not charismatic, not instantly magnetic, but there was a steadiness to him, the kind that doesn't fade when no one's watching. "You're not," I said simply. He looked surprised, like he was expecting me to push him away, like he was used to being the quiet one in someone else's story. But this time, he was part of mine. We didn't talk about the past, not his, not mine. We didn't need to. Instead, we talked about books, about tea flavors, about why the cat from the bookstore always chose the rainiest days to nap by the window. Nothing deep, nothing dramatic, just real. And it felt strange how easy it was to let someone in, now that I was no longer afraid of being left. We walked to the park after the rain stopped. The trees were dripping quietly. The air smelled like new beginnings, and as we sat on a bench under a still damp canopy of leaves, I said the one thing I had been carrying in my chest for weeks. I think I stopped waiting for someone to come back. The moment I started liking who I was without them. He didn't smile, didn't lean in, didn't take it as a signal. He just nodded, like he understood completely, like he had once done the same. That night, I didn't write in my journal. I didn't overthink, didn't question. I just placed the book he gave me back on the shelf, right next to my old favorites. And it fit there, not because it was the best story I'd ever read, but because it was the one that reminded me. Love doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it just sits beside you in the rain, and says nothing. And that's enough. Somewhere between heartbreak and healing, I had found something softer. Not the kind of love that made my heart race with fear of losing it, but the kind that made me feel safe in the stillness. And I realized, I didn't win because I let him go. I won because I stayed, with myself. With the girl who chose peace over chaos, who chose patience over chasing. And maybe, just maybe, someone kind was walking beside her now. Not to save her, but to keep her company while she saved herself. And that finally was enough. It rained that night, not hard, not loud, just soft and steady, the kind of rain that feels like the sky is remembering something too. I sat on my windowsill, knees pulled to my chest, listening to the water tapping on the glass like fingers that once held mine. I hadn't seen him since graduation. Not the boy I let go. Not the one who stayed quietly by my side either. Just me, alone, but not lonely. Still, I couldn't help it. I reached into the back of my drawer and pulled out something I hadn't touched in months. A faded photograph. The only one we ever took where I looked happy, and he looked like he meant it. We were laughing in that photo. I remember the moment clearly. I had just made a stupid joke. He said it wasn't funny, but he smiled anyway. I believed him. Then I believed so much. I didn't know back then that some people smile to keep you close, even when they're already walking away inside. My thumb traced the edges of the photo, and I let myself feel it, just for a moment. Not regret, just grief for a version of myself who didn't know better. A girl who thought love meant breaking yourself just to fit inside someone else's world. I whispered something to the photo. Not "I miss you," not "Why did you leave?" Just "Thank you for teaching me what not to accept." Later that night, I passed the bookstore again, the one I used to work at. It was closed now, lights off, sign gently swaying in the wind. But outside, someone had chalked a message on the sidewalk. "Even if we don't end up together, I hope you're loved like you deserve." I didn't know who wrote it. Maybe it was for someone else entirely. But I stood there in the rain for a long time, just staring at those words. Because once I had wished that kind of love would come from him, and now I wasn't wishing anymore. Just hoping that somewhere in the quiet corners of this world, someone like me, someone who waited too long, gave too much, bent too far, was finally being held gently. The next morning I deleted the photo, not in anger, not out of hate, but because sometimes letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means making space for something real, something soft, something that won't ask you to shrink just to be chosen. And maybe that kind of love still hadn't found me yet. But now, I was ready. The rain hadn't stopped since last night. The world outside my window was soft and gray, blurred like an old memory. I was folding my laundry when I heard it. A quiet knock at the door. I thought maybe it was my neighbor, maybe a delivery, but when I opened it he was standing there. Him. The one who had never demanded anything, who never asked me to be less, who never tried to rush the silence out of me. He held an umbrella in one hand, and a paper bag in the other. "You didn't come to class," he said softly. "And I just thought, maybe you'd want soup." I stared at him for a second longer than I should have, then stepped aside. He didn't speak much. He just placed the bag on the table, took out the container, and poured it carefully into a bowl like it was something sacred. It wasn't about the soup. It never had been. It was about someone showing up when they didn't have to. About warmth without expectation. "You know," he said, finally breaking the silence, "I never asked what happened between you and him." I looked down, stirring the soup with my spoon. "Because you knew I wouldn't tell you?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, because I didn't want to make you relive something you already survived." The silence after that wasn't heavy. It was understanding. And I think in that moment I realized something I had spent so long thinking love was about proving yourself, holding on, fixing, sacrificing. But maybe love, real love, wasn't loud. Maybe it was showing up with soup on a rainy morning and asking nothing in return. He didn't reach for my hand. He didn't look at me like I owed him something. He just sat there, with me in the quiet. And somehow, that made me feel more seen than any confession ever could. I wasn't sure what we were, or where this would go. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. Because this time, I wasn't being chosen in my silence. I was being heard in it. That morning stayed with me longer than I expected. Not because of the soup, not because of the rain, but because he didn't ask for anything. Not a story, not a promise, not even a thank you. He just sat beside me like silence was something sacred, not something to fill. After he left, the apartment felt different, quieter but not empty, like peace had moved in and decided to stay a little while. The next day, I saw him sitting on the bench outside campus, a book in his lap, earphones in, his head tilted toward the sunlight, like he was soaking in something no one else could see. I walked up, quietly, just like he always did. He didn't look surprised. He just scooted over, made space for me, and said, "You don't have to talk. We can just sit." So we did. No pressure, no expectations, just two people existing beside each other. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to be anything. Not perfect, not healed, not strong, just present. After a while, I asked, "Do you always carry books around you've already read?" He smiled without looking up. "Sometimes I revisit things that made sense to me, just to see if they still do." That line stayed in my head for days, because I had been doing the same, replaying the past, retelling old stories in my head, trying to see if they still held meaning. Some of them didn't, but some, like this quiet, steady presence beside me, felt like a new chapter. That evening, I got a message from him. Not long, not dramatic, just a photo of the bench, now empty under the fading sky, and a text, "You looked peaceful today. That matters more than anything else." I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied, "I never thought I'd feel safe sitting beside someone again." And his reply came fast, but simple. "Then I'll stay until you forget why you were afraid in the first place." I didn't cry, but I felt something shift quietly inside me. The girl who once begged to be loved, was now being held by something softer, steadier. Not passion, not obsession, just presence. And maybe, that was enough. It rained again the following weekend. Not heavy, just soft, like the world was whispering instead of weeping. We met at the same bench outside the bookstore. He was already there, as always, waiting, not anxiously, not nervously, just patiently, like the sky, like the ground, like someone who knew how to stay. He offered me a warm drink. I took it but didn't say much. For a while, we just watched people pass by, umbrellas bobbing like little paper boats in a quiet sea. Then I said it, not all of it, just enough. He made me feel like I had to earn love, like every good moment came with a price, like if I didn't fight hard enough, it meant I didn't care. And when I finally stopped fighting, he blamed me for giving up. I didn't cry, but my hands trembled slightly as I held the cup. He didn't speak right away, didn't offer some perfect response. He just nodded, slowly, like someone who knew how heavy it was to carry a heart that had begged too long to be held. Then he said, "Some people think love is about intensity, but real love doesn't burn you to the ground. It builds you back, brick by brick, even when you've forgotten how to be whole." I looked down. "I spent so long being afraid of being forgotten," I whispered, "of not being enough to stay." He leaned in just a little, not to crowd me, not to fix me, just close enough for me to hear him clearly. "You were always enough. You just gave it to the wrong person first." That was the moment I broke. Not into tears, but into something quieter. Relief. I looked up at him through soft, stinging eyes and said, I'm not used to this. Used to what? He asked gently. Someone staying. When I'm not shining. He smiled. Warm and steady. Maybe that's because you've been taught love is earned. But I'm here to remind you, it's also given. The rain slowed. The wind softened. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't holding my breath. I was just breathing. With someone beside me, not trying to rewrite the past, not trying to fill the silence, not rushing toward a future, just being. And maybe that's the real ending. Not a grand confession, not a perfect kiss, just this peace, after the storm.